As the cost of living crisis continues to deepen, with inflation now at its highest rate in 40 years, the price of almost everything is going up, with the increases largely driven by post-pandemic demand and the war in Ukraine. Energy costs are one of the biggest contributors to rising inflation. Bills went up in April and are expected to jump again this winter by £1,000, bringing the average household bill to just shy of £3,000 a year. Food prices are also surging. Minced beef, chicken breast and pasta are seeing the highest hikes in cash terms. And fuel prices are also hitting people's pockets. Filling up the tank of an average family car will now cost you in the region of £100. Well, we went out to a grocer's in Glasgow to see how people are coping.
I live on my own, so it's like I'm kind of maybe buying more unhealthy options because it's cheaper to buy than like fresh fruit and veg and things like that. Basic things that old school people eat are hugely overpriced, like things that pies, baked beans, oxtail cubes. It's ridiculous.
My work, I travel quite a distance, so with fuel costs as well, it's really hard, and I've got a wee boy. And I'm also expecting, so it's no great. I worry that I might need to just cut even my maternity leave short and just continue working full time.
Well, tough times for many, that's for sure. Well, joining us to discuss this further is Gurpreet Narwan, who's Consumer Affairs Editor at the Telegraph. And here in the studio is Neil Cowan, Campaigns and Policy Manager at Poverty Alliance. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show. We appreciate your time. I'll start with you, Gurpreet. A 40-year record high. We've touched on it a little bit already, but what's behind this?
Yeah, so there are a few factors at play here, and they've all just sort of come to a head at the same time. One of the major contributors to inflation that we've seen over the past few months has just been simply the lifting of lockdown restrictions all over the world. And we've had a lot of pent-up demand for consumer spending, for travelling, for construction projects and investment projects that are all now being released. And that's putting a huge amount of pressure on supply. And that's what's contributing to a lot of these price pressures. And then you add, of course, the war in Ukraine to that, which is putting a huge amount of pressure on commodity prices. And we're seeing food prices rise as a result. And of course, energy bills aren't being done any favours by the war in Ukraine. And of course, we've had all that stimulus that was put into the economy during the pandemic as governments sought to protect their economies from recession. And some of that is still sloshing about in the system and contributing to these price rises.
So a lot of factors there. Neil, you campaign for better support for people who are really feeling the pinch. We just heard from some in our clips just there. Who are you finding are needing the most support right now, or is it universal?
Well, I think what we've seen over the past few months is growing hardship really across the board in communities across the country. But what we know is that it's people on the lowest incomes that are feeling the biggest pressure from the ongoing cost of living crisis. I think it's important to remember that even before the pandemic, 2 years ago, we had over 1 million people in Scotland living in the grip of poverty. And for them, there was already a cost of living crisis then. Exactly. And so, for those people, their situation is only intensified. They're finding it even more difficult to put food on the table, even more difficult to pay their rent, even more difficult to pay their bills. And so I think it's really incumbent upon, and actually is a moral duty on all levels of government to do everything they can to target support at the lowest incomes to help keep people afloat through what is a really, really difficult time for many, many households.
We hear the phrase heat or eat very often. What are you finding there's a bigger demand for? Is it heating or food? Where's the problem?
Well, I think the fundamental problem is a lack of income, and so that means that you can't.
Both,
so exactly. So it's people struggling to pay their rent, pay their food bills, pay their gas bills, their electricity bills, pay to get transport to work. All these kind of things that the daily costs that we all have, people are really, really struggling to make, and that boils down to a lack of income, and that's caused by a labour market that pushes too many people into low-paid and insecure jobs, and by a social security system that too often pushes people into rather than protects them from poverty. And so the kind of systemic factors that is really intensifying the hardship for people, those systemic factors have been there for years, and the current crisis is only kind of exacerbating and highlighting them.
And Gurpreet, we're expecting inflation to rise further, up to 11% in the autumn. Is it a case it's going to get worse before it gets better. Can it be managed?
I mean, yes, it is going to get worse before it gets better. The forecasts are for 11%, but the Bank of England has consistently got it wrong on inflation. So it could well go higher than that, and it could last for longer than the bank is anticipating. Some business leaders in a recent survey said that inflation could stay high for about 2 or 3 years. So, I mean, all the economic data at the moment is telling us that it is going to get worse. But the hope is, of course, that things do improve. I think when we talk about 11%, just to touch on some of these earlier points, it's important to point out that there are some people whose inflation rate is much higher than 11%. Poorer families spend a higher proportion of their income on things like energy bills and on food. So the reality is that for some families, the hardship is going to be a lot greater than those headline figures suggest. And that's really important to keep in mind when we talk about the policy response to this inflationary crisis.
And Gurpreet, talking about the policy response, what can be done realistically? What can be done?
I mean, there's some things have already been done. The Chancellor has unveiled a sort of a £15 billion package to support people, and particularly those on the lowest incomes. So that should be recognised. But of course, there's so much more that can be done. I think at the moment the focus there are so many geopolitical factors affecting inflation, and it's something that's affecting governments all over the world. But what the government can do is make people's lives easier. And that means supporting those on the lowest incomes, having proper targeted support, and making sure that we don't have more people slipping into poverty than need to. We've already seen, some of this spilling over in quite a big way into industrial disputes, as people are frustrated that their wages aren't keeping up with inflation.
Just not keeping up.
And what's so frustrating for the government is that, the more pay rises that there are in the economy, the more support that the government provides in the form of stimulus, the more inflationary pressure it's injecting into the economy. So it's sort of a lose-lose situation at the moment, I think.
Well, let's put that to Neil. What do you think, very briefly, Neil? What needs to be done?
Well, I think there's a huge range of things that can be done, and I think it's really important to bear that in mind. So I think too often the narrative is that, the cost of living crisis is something that we don't have control over, as if it's some sort of natural occurrence that, we have to be very fatalistic about. But actually it's not, and there's a huge amount of things that we can do, not necessarily to reduce the cost of gas or whatever it is internationally, but a huge amount of things that we can do to protect people just now. So we can make the changes that we need to the social security system. So Gurpreet mentioned the package of support that Rishi Sunak announced a little while ago, and that's really welcome, but there's a huge amount more that he can do. So he can, for example, make sure that benefits are properly adequate, that they meet people's needs. They can scrap the benefit cap, scrap the 2-child limit, and similarly the Scottish Government can take a whole range of action, whether it's the Scottish Child Payment, increasing that further, or action to reduce the cost of housing, childcare, transport. So it's really important to make that point, that every level of government can take action right now, and they really need to get on and do it.
So some practical measures there. Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. So Neil and Gurpreet, thanks very much for joining us. It's an issue on many of our minds, so thanks very much. We appreciate your time.